Fascination with a Color and a Place.
Ooh,
So,
on which
that was on your website.
was that?
So later during your segment, I'm going to give you 3 books and
Okay.
3 locations, and you're going to share with us what you think you would do with binding those books. How's that sound?
That sounds fun.
All right. It'll be fun. It won't be frightening.
That sounds good. And you got my my email with my...
I do. That's all ready to go.
Great. Excellent.
You were very helpful there. I had prepared most of that, but I see where we're going.
Great.
Lee, you're back from Missouri?
Arkansas.
Yeah,
I'm back.
Okay. Did you go with your son and family, or who?
No, I went by myself.
You did?
I did.
What kind of drive was that?
Well, I went to Birmingham to my brother's first, and that's only less than 3 hours. And then it's another 6, a little over, to Conway. So I did it in 2 days. So it really wasn't that bad. The only problem is the I-40 bridge across the Mississippi is closed because it has big cracks in it.
Oh,
and so they're routing everything across a 2-lane I-55, and that's a lot of traffic during the weekdays. But coming back on Sunday wasn't bad.
Mm-hmm.
I used to drive that way all the time. I lived in Mississippi for 7 years.
Yeah. You lived in Jackson, right?
That's right.
Yes.
That's right. Yeah.
So you were at Belhaven?
I was at Millsaps.
Oh, at Millsaps. Okay.
Right across the street.
Right. Yeah. I was just thinking of the proximity to Eudora Welty's home.
Yeah.
Right there with
that
those
a few years back.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, you see how this is how we think. I lived in Mississippi for just a year. I lived down in Natchez, and of course, when I went to Jackson, I wanted to see all of the Civil War embattlements and monuments. And at the time, I wasn't a book collector, so that's what I was thinking when I went to Jackson.
Yeah, it's funny that we all have a connection to that area here today.
And a different reason for enjoying it.
Definitely.
And music, too, as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Great music across the state, and a great music and creative community in Jackson.
The blues, bum, 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 bum.
That's right. Could you remind me how I can share a screen before? Oh, I see the screen share.
Can I give it a try? Can I give it a practice?
Yeah, just because I chose something, I ended up going with something different. So I just want to make sure. There we go.
And in your artist statement, you said that I hold different. That was me, folks. I'm also watching this show on my computer, or on my phone, so I can make notes. I'm multiplexing here, but I've turned the volume down. Technology overload.
I know.
Chrissy, good morning. Hi, Chrissy. Where are you from, Chrissy? Chrissy Chartier, another person of French extraction. Good morning, Chrissy. Share with us where you're from. All right. Are you on the campus? Are you on the university campus, Suzanne?
No, I am at my home in Iowa City, just a few blocks from campus.
Okay, but that in your studios in your home or on the campus?
My studio is at my home. Since I graduated from the Center for the Book a year ago, I've moved my practice to my home studio.
And a press? Do you actually have a press?
No, it's something I aspire to. So one day, hopefully, but it's more of an imprint for the while being until I build up to that.
Yeah, well, that's something most people aspire to is a 1-ton metal object in their living room.
Yes, absolutely. And I'm waiting to be a little more fixed and a little less, wandering and mobile to invest in that serious commitment. I have 2 cats, and that feels like nothing compared to what a Vandercook will hopefully be one day.
A Vandercook?
Yeah, it's a model of cylinder presses that were really big for a time. They were used as proofing presses, if my memory serves, in the field of journalism. And then, of course, like so many other fields, the printed press, got more and more automated. Those machines fell out of use, and then they were reused or they gained in popularity as a way of printing for fine press printers. Because they're both finicky machines, but they also allow for a lot of fine tuning and a lot of experimentation when cared for well. So it's just a model of press that is favored by letterpress printers and book artists and fine press printers.
Nice. Well, we hope to hear more about that in a moment, because I think it's 9:30, and you know what that means. It's time to say hello to our guests. Good morning, everybody. Good afternoon, wherever you may be. Welcome to the Rare Book Cafe, the book lovers' rendezvous, where the topics are priceless and the conversation is free. The Rare Book Cafe is the only weekly live stream program on the internet devoted entirely to rare and collectible books and the people who love them, and that's YOU. We're here every Saturday at 9:30 Pacific time. That's where I am. 12:30 Eastern. That's where Lee Lynn is. 5:30 Greenwich Mean Time for those of you on the other side of the Atlantic pond. But you can find us 24 hours a day because, as I said, we're live streaming on both YouTube and Facebook. And then at the end of the show, our illustrious producer, executive producer, founder, and all-around cool guy, Alan Smith, converts this into a audio podcast, which you can find on your favorite podcast forum, wherever good podcasts are given away for free. We're a virtual cafe, accessible anywhere in the world, and everyone is welcome. With me today are our bookseller and cafe regular Lee Lynn of Ridge Books in Calhoun, Georgia. Good morning, Lee.
Good morning.
And book artist Suzanne Glémot in Iowa City, Iowa. Welcome, ladies.
Good morning.
Glad to be here.
Suzanne, I'm always excited to have book artists on the show because I have absolutely no artistic talent whatsoever. I can't even draw a straight line with a ruler. So some of the things you are about to share with us, I know, are going to be pretty cool.
Thanks. I'm very excited to be here this morning.
And Lee, I understand you've been on the road, and during your segment, you're going to share with us some of the things you found and some of the things you did on the road, as well as your weekly update on your book club. Is that right?
Yes, I am. And I'm finding, because we've had so many book artists on the Rare Book Cafe, that I'm getting addicted to that. And so I'll share my purchases on this trip as well. And I'm really excited to see what Suzanne has brought to share with us today.
And I'm excited to see what you picked up on the road. Well, folks, before we jump into this with both feet, I should mention that we are a live stream program. Some of our content is pre-recorded. We're not trying to trick anybody or get you into believing we are live. People's schedules different throughout the week. It isn't. So some people can't be with us right now. So we are pleased to be able to pre-record their contributions, and we're going to share one of those with you this week. That's David Hess with the popular segment, Things Found in Old Books. And later in the show, we're going to have a surprise visitor that neither Suzanne nor Lee know anything about, but we'll bring them on board, and I think that will stimulate some more lively conversation. We're going to sneak that person in towards the end of the show. But first, I want to bring in Suzanne Glémot, The Art of Memory. Welcome, Suzanne.
Good morning. Hi.
There you are. God, yeah, you look a little bit stark there, Suzanne. Most people have such a curated background I have
so
books, people putting up pictures of the Eiffel Tower. You're just with us, raw and ready to go.
from the most uninteresting corner of my studio. Unfortunately, everything around me is boxes of supplies and shelves of books and stacks of projects. But my computer faces the most boring wall in my apartment. So definitely something to work on for future presentations.
And we expect your cats to make an appearance this morning?
We will see. They've been fed, so they are probably napping at this point. But who knows? It's always a surprise.
If they come wandering in, please introduce them to us.
I will certainly.
Mine have come up on the computer keyboard. Mine has in the past. I've had to excuse myself to remove her.
And mine came up one time and stepped on the power button and turned the whole computer off.
It sounds like it was making a statement.
So,
right.
Suzanne, you're currently in Iowa City, Iowa, but tell us where you've been for the last, 10 years of your career.
Sure. So prior to being in Iowa City, which I moved to for graduate school, I was actually living in Jackson, Mississippi. I did my undergraduate studies there and then stayed to work for a while after I graduated while I was looking for a grad program. And then before that, I was actually living in Eastern Europe. I'm originally from France and grew up kind of all over the place. And so I graduated high school from Belgrade, Serbia. And then from there moved to Mississippi, and that started my current residency, place of residence in the United States.
Well, I think I'm going to have to get in touch with you offline. I'm going to be spending the month of October in the Balkans. And Serbia is on the list, as well as Hungary and Northern Macedonia and Croatia. So I'd love to hear the highlights of where I should go.
I will be happy to chat with you. Yes.
Suzanne, were you an artist before you became a book artist?
Yes. So I found art in high school. I got to take an advanced studio art class, and that was wonderful. When I was applying for colleges, I told everyone that I wanted to be a physics major, but secretly I was also looking for schools that had art programs. That was sort of my secret that no one really knew about. And so I ended up picking a small liberal arts college that was very multidisciplinary, and that afforded students the opportunity to really explore their potential career or selected major. I felt like I couldn't make a decision my freshman year of college. And so I was really glad for the option to take classes across all sorts of different areas of study. And I started a studio art major my sophomore year of college. And then at the end of my junior year of college, I fell into a book arts class. And then all of a sudden, maybe, over the course of a semester, that semester that I took the class, a lot of the things that weren't quite clicking for me in painting and printmaking, which I loved, but I still felt like something was missing, started to make a lot of sense in the book arts, especially the ability to work in 3 dimensions, in sequences, right? Because when you're turning the pages of a book, if that's the structure that you decide to build, there's a lot of interactivity. There's a lot of opportunity to break down your story or your image across different folds. And then the ability to use text was something that I was really excited about as well.
What is your artist statement? What is your philosophy? What is it that you keep foremost in mind when you start a new project, Suzanne?
It vacillates between 2 areas of interest, and one of those is craftsmanship. I'm really interested in the act and the almost meditative practice of making something by hand, which is another reason that books really appeal to me. They're very time and technique intensive. So craftsmanship is really important in any new project that I approach, trying to think about what technique I'm interested in exploring, or what technique will support the specific project, and thinking about, how this technique came to me, right? Like what its history is, why it is done the way it's done, I'm really interested in how things are built well. So craftsmanship is a big consideration. And then on the idea side of things, conceptually, my interest is around memory and remembrance. So I often gravitate towards subjects or stories that have something to do with memory, the act of remembering. More recently, I've been interested in the connection or the connections between language, place, and memory.
Curious. I imagine you're multilingual.
Curious.
I am, which is kind of that interest in language. So I'm a dual citizen with France. I was raised bilingual, and so this idea of how memory is compartmentalized, maybe based on language, or how bilingualism functions, is something that I've looked at and would like to continue looking at as I move into more work.
Do you have a person that you would categorize as your mentor? Anybody in your training background who has really helped establish your technique?
Yeah, there are two women that I learned a lot from, amongst many, at the University of Iowa Center for the Book, which is where I did my graduate degree. One of them is Giselle Simon. She is the head of conservation and a bookbinding instructor at the University of Iowa. And so I've learned a lot in terms of technique and craftsmanship around bookbinding from her, as well as Julie Smith, who also works in preservation and conservation at the University of Iowa. Learned a lot of great structures from her. And then in terms of concept development, Sarah Langworthy, who's a letterpress printer and book artist, was really formative in my letterpress printing instruction, as well as image making development. And I'd also have to name Karen Karsha, who's another, she's a poet and a book artist, letterpress printer, who really spent a lot of time with me while I was in graduate school thinking about how narratives were built and working on text development.
Great. Well, let me remind our visitors that they can learn more about you at your website, Suzanne Glémot, Glemot.com. And in case you want to check out some of her works while she's sharing with us this morning. But Suzanne, why don't you share a couple of your works with us? Do you have anything in front of you?
Yes, I think I have a slide pulled up, and I don't know if that's visible in the system, but I started a screen share.
Let's give it a try.
There we go. So a couple of pieces that I'm excited to talk to you about today. Thinking about memory and thinking about material. One of the more recent projects that I completed towards the end of grad school, I have a thesis project that is still in progress. I was in my last year at the UICB in the spring of 2020. And well, since we all know what happened then, part of the impact on my practice was losing access to studio space, which I haven't quite regained yet. So that will be a forthcoming project. Before that, I had the chance to complete this small artist book that's called Marigolds, and it's based on the opening line from Toni Morrison's The Bluest Eye. And it's a sentence that reads, "Quiet as it's kept, there were no marigolds in the fall of, I think it's 1941, if memory serves." This sentence, when I was studying this book in one of my graduate classes, is just one that I couldn't get out of my head. And in order to sort of get it out of my system, I felt like I had to make a book about it. So just in terms of thinking of how I relate to other works or other books, rare books, that's sort of a starting place for me. Will sometimes be to find material that interests me. And so I created this small book, and one of the things that was really interesting when I was studying the early editions of Toni Morrison's The Bluest Eye was the use of typographic ornaments in the early editions of the novel. And so on this screen to the left, you can see I think it's a 2007 edition of The Bluest Eye by Vintage International. And you can see that throughout the title page and then the chapter headings or the section headings of the book, the typesetters used the same little leaf ornament, but then over to the right, this is, I think, a reproduction of one of the earliest editions of her novel. You can actually see that different typographic ornaments that almost have a calligraphic hand to them were used to mark each one of these sections of the book, and they're split up based on the 4 seasons. And so as I was working on the book, I found a drawer of type ornaments at the University of Iowa Center for the Book. And one of them had the small shape of a flower, and it looked very similar in its marks or in its lines to some of those ornaments that was used in Toni Morrison's The Bluest Eye. And so I felt like I had to use it to sort of indicate it's right at the fold where you can fold back the back cover and reveal the colophon or the information about how the book was made. And
a quick question for you, if I might.
Please, of course.
I noticed that you recently gave an online seminar called Copyright 101. Yeah. What was necessary? What's necessary for or appropriate for a bookbinder to do to take an existing book and rebind it? Was there paperwork you have to do? Do you have to get in touch with the publisher? What's the background behind that?
That's such a good question, Ed. So as a grad student, I got to work for the University of Iowa Press, where I managed intellectual property for them. And so I learned a lot about what goes into that kind of work from my work with them. And in this specific case, because I was reusing, the only text that was going to be in the book was text that wasn't mine, it felt important to reach out to Penguin Random House, who manages Toni Morrison's intellectual property, or at least at the time did, or they were processing her requests. I think she still had the final say as to whether or not my request would be granted. This was just a few months before she passed away, and I'm assuming that her estate now manages her intellectual property. But it was really important to get that permission to reprint the text and to work with the text. And so I actually found the email address for permissions and intellectual property management at Penguin Random House and wrote them a letter that explained who I was and how and why I wanted to use that opening line for her novel, and sent it to them. And then within a few weeks, they got back to me and they said, yes, here are the conditions under which you can use this text. That included, no commercial endeavors on my part. So I've never sold copies of this book. I have given them away and distributed them. But because I was requesting that the permission be granted to me for no fee, because it wasn't really something that had in the budget for making this book, it was, since I wasn't making money off of this book, then they would agree to grant it to me at no cost. So that was sort of, that can be. Commercial value is a big consideration in terms of how permissions are granted.
All right, I interrupted you there. Please continue on with the photograph that you had selected.
Oh, sure. So yeah, this is just going back to an earlier slide, and also just to indicate, how much of the text from Toni Morrison's novel I use. I'll just scroll back through these a little more quickly. But in this, I just wanted to share this slide. It's on the cover of the book. There's a very faint image of a marigold, and this was made from. I started painting or using my skills from painting from undergrad to create photo negatives from which I created relief. Relief printmaking is being able to print from the surface of a plate, a printmaking plate. And so the plate in the image in the middle, the yellow block, is a photosensitive, it responds to light material called photopolymer. And so I exposed the negative that I painted onto the photopolymer. And then from that yellow plate, I was able to print what you see on the right. I did a little book plate as a practice exercise. But then that same image of the marigolds is what's featured on the cover of the that chapbook, or that small little artist book. So you can get a sense of my process as well, and where I use some of my prior training in painting in the books that I make.
Suzanne, real quick question here. Clarify for us what you consider to be a chapbook. We use that term a lot. I think that any book that's, smaller than a 4x5 format is a chapbook, but what really is a chapbook?
That's a great question. I don't think I've ever fully defined it for myself. I get the sense, as you do, that it tends to be a slighter volume. I know that chapbooks can be more commercially produced, or produced, let's say, more digitally without as much handwork. Because I think a lot of poets, for example, will, early collections of poetry, especially in places where there's a lot of maybe independent bookstores or a lot of exchange or interest in poetry. I know that chapbooks are really big in that community, in that area of practice. And in the book arts, I think it is just, yes, a lighter book is something that is maybe, it doesn't typically have hard covers on it.
Yeah.
It might be more akin to a pamphlet than a hardcover book.
Let me bring Lee back in.
Okay.
The book dealer than I am. What's your experience with chapbooks?
Not a great deal. I mean, my if I had to give a definition, it would have been very small and probably, soft cover. Poems particularly, or sometimes small little humorous stories, that kind of thing. But I have a couple of questions in looking at your website, Suzanne. I noticed another workshop that you did that required some prior knowledge of bookbinding. For those of us who have no prior knowledge of bookbinding, do you ever do really, really basic online workshops that people, I know terminology because of being a bookseller, but I couldn't do it. And I just wondered if you ever did anything that's really on a basic level.
Sure. Thank you for asking that question, Lee. I actually only just started teaching workshops this year. So these are the first couple that I was able to present through the Minnesota Center for Book Arts. And I really do hope to get to continue doing this kind of teaching component, either through them. I've really had a good time working with them, or maybe through other organizations, or maybe eventually just directly through my own practice and website. But yeah, I am interested in teaching a range of workshops. This one in particular, I had been approached and asked if I would be willing to offer a more intermediate level kind of workshop. But I know that there's such great book arts organizations that during the pandemic have really developed strong delivery systems through remote or virtual education for taking bookbinding workshops at all sorts of levels. The Minnesota Center for Book Arts, the San Francisco Center for Book Arts, the Center for Book Arts in New York City, all of these organizations, I think there's one in Austin, Texas as well, have a great range of workshops offered. So if not through me, then there are tons of practicing book artists who offer workshops at all sorts of levels.
That would be fun. That would be fun to do. Another thing from looking at your website that I noticed was a poem by Claude McKay, Lynching. Did you do that just as a broadside, or what exactly was that?
Sure.
I've dealt a good bit with his, books, and I just found it. I like that poem a lot, and particularly where he refers to the blue eyes, and without saying white people.
Yep.
And I thought that was really, I really was drawn to that.
Thank you. Yeah, I'll pull it up on my website since I didn't have it in my slides, but I can share that slide with everyone. Let me see if I can get it to share. let's see, screen share. Well, I'll just talk and then see if I can get it up. But the poem "The Lynching" was the poem that I chose to print in my letterpress 1 class. It was one of my first forays into letterpress printing, and I needed a short bit of text to really practice typesetting. And at the same time that this assignment came up, I was thinking a lot about questions of race and racism and the importance of community engagement in these questions. While I was in grad school, there was a lot of the thought process that was going through my mind, and the importance of remembering historical factual events. And so this is why I chose to produce this poem. It is now in the public domain, so that was another reason to want to work with it. But yeah, so it's produced as a broadside. The poem by Claude McKay is on the right side, and then on the left side are the names at the time that I was printing it, since there have been so many more since. But the names of men and women unarmed of color who had been murdered by police in the United States. So trying to have contemporary events be in conversation and dialogue with the past, and the importance of remembering the past and understanding our contemporary present.
Very nice, very nice. You mentioned earlier that you have a relationship with old rare books sometimes that give you inspiration. Are you yourself a rare book collector? And how does that influence new bindings for you?
Sure. No, I am not intentionally a collector. I through grad school and through doing a lot of chapbook or artist book and letterpress exchanges with my classmates, I actually have acquired a pretty nice collection of artist books. On the rare book side of things, I have a copy of Jane Eyre from, I don't know, about the 40s or so, that my mom gifted to me in my teens. And then I also recently came into possession of an early edition of Cyrano de Bergerac, the 1898 French play by Edmond Rostand. And this was my mom, again, was at an antiquarian bookshop in France and saw the spine of the book, and thought that the nettle or bluet, I can't remember what flower is on it, but that the gilding was really lovely, and she pulled it open and she realized that it was a first edition, not first printing. I think it's like the 26th printing or something like that, but still a really cool piece to have. And I've actually done a number of pieces over the years based on texts that I enjoy from the play. It's sort of a go-to of mine when I'm learning a technique to either practice a calligraphic hand or to practice typesetting. So this is an example on our shared screens of a portion of the play that I set from a more recent copy that I have, because I didn't want to get inky thumbprints as I was setting type on the early edition. But this edition is so that is sort of my in my own studio and practice relationship with rare books, and then when I have access to them, I've also enjoyed working from materials that are held in archives or special collections.
You know, Suzanne, for us book dealers out here who do find a first edition of Cyrano de Bergerac with a destroyed cover and wanting to improve its value, it's really hard to find commercial bookbinders nowadays. Do you do any one-on-one work for people?
I do. So that is the other side of my practice.
I
That
guess you've got to eat,
that
right?
for me fulfills. Yeah, that's right. But well, and thankfully I've been lucky to have interest in my studio art, but I don't get to produce that as frequently. So yes, the other side of my practice is actually around book repair and book preservation, and so part of my studio is set up as a small bindery to be able to take on private book repair for anyone who's interested. And so as part of my graduate studies, I was lucky to be able to spend a lot of time studying bookbinding, and that included training and work in book conservation at the University of Iowa Main Libraries. So I do have some of that skill set to be able to work with a reasonable range of materials.
So what about your book arts pieces? Do you sell, and through what medium do you sell?
Sure. I usually sell directly. I've shown work at book fairs, and that has allowed me to interact with both private collectors as well as institutional collectors, so librarians who are looking to grow collections that they have in book arts or rare materials for universities around the country. And then I've also done direct sales from folks who stumble upon my website. And so have worked with them in that way.
Okay.
Good for you. Your career is on its way.
Hopefully, that's
Oh, it
certainly
sounds
the
like
goal.
you're definitely on the way. Suzanne, I'd like to play a little game with you. I hate to put you on the spot. Well,
All
I
right.
guess I'm doing it, so I am putting you on the spot. But I noticed in your artist statement on your website, you say, "I hold dear an attempt at capturing a fascination with a color and a place." So I'm going to give you 3 books, which obviously have a location associated with them. And I would like you to share with us what your first impressions are, what you would do with the book arting of these books. And I'm going to make the first one pretty easy because it's right in your home state or your current state of Iowa. The Bridges of Madison County by Robert Waller. What would you do with that?
Oh, so if someone were to come to me with a copy of the book?
Yeah, what's your first impression?
Oh my gosh. You know, I might try to, if it was possible to sew into it and sew into the folds, maybe challenge myself with a nice leather binding with some embroidery work into the cover, maybe some nice lines that would try to capture some of the bridge structures, the covered bridge structures that are in a lot of places of Iowa, I think, but especially Madison County, of course. That would be maybe my first sketchbook idea, and then grow it from there.
I love how you say I would challenge myself. You find that with every new project, it's something you're looking forward to doing something you haven't done before?
I try, yes. I enjoy returning to techniques that I've learned to apply the skills that I've really honed, but I also do try to do something new. I really enjoy problem solving, and so figuring out how to make a thing work tends to be really fun for me.
I noticed that you did a book called The Black Holes by Stephen Hawking. Let's go to the other side of the color spectrum. What would you do with Moby Dick and Nantucket Island?
Oh, goodness. Great question. There are some handmade papers so handmade papers can definitely have the weight of more of a book page, so can be lighter weight. But there are some folks who produce handmade paper in a really nice, what is called a cover weight. So a lot more rigid, a lot more durable paper that can actually be used as a book cover material. And some of them get dyed in these beautiful indigo colors. And the process of dip dyeing with indigo is such that you can get a lot of gentle curves into the sheet of paper.
I can see.
And so like the sea. And so maybe playing with some handmade paper that had been dyed in that way that is evocative of a place, of a landscape, and the particular setting of the story could be an interesting way to build the cover for that book.
Very clever. Very clever. All right, here's the last one. Small Town America, Leaves of Grass by Walt Whitman.
Oh, I think the thing I would want to do is go to other imagery and the going back to the aesthetics of ornamentation that would have been in the ethos around the time that Leaves of Grass was written, and to pull details from some of the work that was being created at the time, and kind of do maybe sketch out a collage, pulling some of these ornamental details, and then use that to design a book cover. It's, I don't know if I would go with a leather or a paper cover. I feel like there are different ways of going. Maybe even a wooden board cover to really get that wood grain.
How about a Marshland cover?
Oh gosh, that's beautiful. Lovely. Yeah. So I think that pulling in different materials or different textures, as well as various ornaments and patterns, could be a really fun way to at least start sketching out. I would have to spend more time with it for sure.
You did a great job. You've got a tremendous career ahead of you. Lee, any questions for Suzanne before we move on to the next segment?
I think something that you said about increased interest during the pandemic in book arts, it's certainly true. We've had a little more time. We haven't been out traveling. We haven't, and yet the hands-on quality of it, has been appealing. And I think Rare Book Cafe has been promoting. We've done a lot on book arts this year. Really have. And I think it's a field that more and more people are getting, collectors are getting interested in. At least I know I am. But
they really are one of a kinds. I mean, it's it's a whole different experience. I'd say you did a Moby Dick. It's a whole different experience than having a first edition of Moby Dick. It's a much more multi-sensory, experience than having it. But some of the things you've done are really just beautiful, just beautiful.
Thank you.
And I love the way you talked about doing the marigold as if all of these processes were so simple. They just naturally flowed from one to another, whereas we probably had no idea what you were talking about.
I apologize. I tried to break it down. It's so hard when you don't actually get to show, the actual image plate or the paper sample to say, here, feel it, touch it, see what I'm talking about.
And that's what we've all missed about no book fairs this year.
That's right.
It's a lot easier to sell a book if you have it in hand, and that a collector can actually handle it and look at it. And
I think that's the whole reason. That's the whole reason that book artists go to the fairs, to actually say, hey, here's why what I'm doing is special or appealing, or why you should want to spend time with artist books. And certainly why I think collectors go in person as opposed to shop around based on websites. It's because of course, photography is great and it can capture so much, but you really are missing, Lee, I think that tactile, interactive, sometimes even playful part of the book arts that you were talking about is so, I think, unique and wonderful to the field in particular.
With artist books, but with any books. I had a customer who called yesterday about a particular book and wound up buying 2 more. And because we got to talking about what was in the book he wanted, and then I said, well, I have another one that's on a similar topic. And then he asked me to look for another topic. And it would have been a lot easier had we been face to face.
Absolutely.
Than on a phone call.
But I'm
Well,
glad you were able to share all of that with them.
Yeah, it worked out in the end.
as Lee said, we've done a lot on book arts this year, and Suzanne Glémot, you are definitely a leader in this coming new generation of talented book artists. Thank you for sharing your expertise and skills and thought knowledge with us today.
Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to share and to have this conversation with you.
All right. Well, if you can stick around a little bit longer, we're going to be talking a little bit more about book arts towards the end of the show, and I think we would love to hear your opinion on that. But before we get there, our next segment is the weekly beloved segment on Things Found in Books by David Hess of the Bookman Bookstore in Orange, California. He's been looking into some of the old books coming into his store and finding very interesting items, including a 1920 marriage license and a little bit more. Let's listen in on David and see what he has to share this week. Take it away, David.
Hello, this is David from the Bookman in Orange, California, saying hello and welcoming you to my segment of Things Found in Old Books. And I have found some stuff this week, and I'd love to share it with you. And we're going to start off with trees. Now, something we find, we book dealers and other people possibly find in books quite often are pressed flowers and leaves and things like that. So I find a lot of that stuff, and sometimes I'll open the book and they'll just crumble right out. They're so old. Find an old rose or something in it, and you leave it in. I don't know what to do with them, but they're in the books. So I found this book called Trees, and what this particular person has done was get a book, and there's leaves on the page. And what they've done is inserted the leaf and leaves in the book. So this particular leaf, according to the book, is a balsam poplar leaf. Balsam poplar leaf. There you go. And it's found in, it looks like up in the north side of the U.S. So there we go. North. In the back here, a little further, we have your oak leaves. It looks like white oaks, according to the drawing here in the book, and the leaf itself looks like some white oak leaves right there in the book. And lastly, we got your maple leaf. Actually, a couple maple leaves, different style. Maple leaves, good. And there's a few more in there, but you get the idea. So, like I said, at least this tells you what the leaves are and why they're in the book. Oftentimes, I have no idea why the rose is in the book, except for some, it means something to them, so they put a rose in, but then it's forgotten. In this book, Asimov's Biographical Encyclopedia of Science and Technology, there was an article glued in to a piece of paper here, June 30th, 1969, by Robert Kirsch. And it's a report, an article about this particular book by Isaac Asimov. And so, but, that was interesting. But a little further down, a little further back here, was a pass to the Mardi Gras de Mexico at the Universal City Studios Entertainment Center, adult 12 and over for $2.50. Now, there's no date on this, but doing a little bit of research, the Universal out here in California opened in '69. I think the one in Florida opened a bit later in the '70s. And my guess is this is probably from the era of the book and the article, probably around '69. And it's in mint shape. I mean, it's like it's never. Was it put in the book? It never moved from the book. gorgeous. I love the graphics on it, and I just love these old ticket stubs that that you know, bring us back in time to another day. Finally, well, not finally. I got a couple more here. We got The Emergence of Film, relatively common book, and in that book is, and many book dealers are going to come across these as well. It's the publisher sent this particular copy to the Mr. Priest, editor and publisher of International Festivals, and so he's sending it to Mr. Priest for you to review the copy and send us any copies of your review and stuff like that. It's signed by the publisher. And so this book at one time was sent to somebody as a review copy. Also in the book, that really has nothing to do with this book, but I found it interesting because I'm very familiar with the book this is talking about. It's a press release for Buckmaster Fuller. Buckmaster Fuller, you come with a photograph to publish in your newspaper there, and it's a little press blurb talking about Buckmaster Fuller's book, Operating Manual for Spaceship Earth, will be published April 28th, 1969 by the Southern Illinois University Press for $4.25. And then he talks about the geodesic dome and so forth. And so the book still is viable and still sells. And so there's a press release for Mr. Buckmaster Fuller. I thought that was fascinating. It's in a film book. Who knew? And a little while ago, this came across my desk. I unfortunately, don't have the book to go with it. But what it is I hereby certify that on this 24th day, June 1924, in Maryland, Warren R. Nicholson and Helen Windsor were united in marriage in accordance with license by the clerk of the city court for Cecil County in the state of Maryland. So this is a 1924 marriage license in Maryland. Married in Maryland. Yeah, that's pretty neat. So there it is. And a little while ago, somebody sent me something on the eBookman, oldbook.com, of a thing that they had found in a book, and I'd like to share that with you. We'll include pictures, and I'll read a little bit of the letter that was sent to me. I'll share with you. It's from Patricia Bishop of Blue Note Vintage. So thank you, Patricia. I really very grateful for you sending this to me. It says, "Hello, David. I joined the Rare Book Cafe on Saturdays and have enjoyed your segment on things found in old books. I would like to share with you, and if you judge worthy, you sharing this find on your segment. I'd be glad to. Thank you. The Clip newspaper article, Financing New Freedom, is not dated. However, it does mention the 63rd Congress, which was from 1913 to 1915. It does mention 12 days after the start of the 63rd Congress, which would have been March 16th, 1913. The last line, the new freedom evidently comes high, but if we must have it, we have got to pay for it. Seems it is still true. The book that was found in is The Scholar and the State and Other Orations and Addresses by Henry C. Potter, Bishop of New York, edition 1898. The more interesting, however, is that the owner of the book, Alva Adams, 1850 to 1922, the book is from his library. See the book plate. Adams, a Democrat, was elected the 5th governor of Colorado, 1887 to 1889, again elected 1897 to 1899. But his last run for office of governor in 1905 was short-lived. January 10th, 05 to March 16th, 05. March 17th, 05 is known as the day Colorado had 3 governors. And she goes on to detail why Colorado had 3 governors on that day. It's a little lengthy, And so what we'll do is we'll include the article in the show notes for you to read if you're interested in why Colorado had 3 governors on one day. It's actually quite interesting. You should give it a read. And I want to thank you again for sending that in. That was very kind. And I hope other people really, take the time to send me anything that they find in a used book. I'd love to share it here on this segment. And send me pictures and descriptions of what you find at oldbook at ebookman.com. Oldbook at ebookman.com. And I'll share it. It'll be my pleasure. And I want to thank you for stopping by today. And I look forward to seeing you next week. That's all I have. This is David from the Bookman in Orange saying goodbye.
Thank you, David. Welcome back, everybody. Well, I guess you never really left and didn't go anywhere, so thanks for sticking around. Real quickly here, let me give you a synopsis of what happened on that day in 1905 when Colorado had 3 governors in a single day. Well, it seems as though Alva Adams, the man who owned that book and whom you saw in the video, was elected governor. He was a Democrat. His opponent, James Peabody, was the incumbent Republican governor, and he disputed the election. Oh my, where have we heard that before? Now, both of them had apparently engaged in questionable election practices, and it became quite heated. But it was up to the Republican legislature of Colorado to decide the outcome of the election. And they decided for the Republican, but only after he agreed to step aside immediately, which he did. Thus, his lieutenant governor, Jesse Fuller McDonald, became governor that day in the moment that he stepped aside. And that's how Colorado had 3 governors in one day in 1905. Check back to the show later and we'll have more details for that on you. But now let's bring Lee Lynn back in. Lee has been sharing with us the last few weeks about her book club. Lee, did your book club have a chance to meet on Thursday?
Well, actually, 6 members had dinner together last night, but we didn't talk a lot about books. But what I want to tell y'all about today is some of the things that we've done besides just reading a specific book and discussing it. You've probably noticed if you've been listening to us that we like to eat and drink and socialize. And so we like a little variety, and we have a couple of special events every year. One of them is our Christmas party, and then I'm going to figure out a way to invite our listeners to join us for part of the Christmas party this year. But the other is that we, about once a year, invite a writer to join us. And over the years, we've had probably 8 or 9 Georgia authors to come and discuss their work. We preceded by dinner, of course. And we meet either at my house or Jane and Ed have a cabin on a pond near the Oostanala River. And the Oostanala is one of the rivers that's in the setting for, don't laugh, Ed, that's really the name of it, it's Cherokee. Part of the setting for Mignon Ballard's book, No Word for Goodbye, that we talked about earlier.
It was on our show about a month ago.
Right, yes. And in 2007, I attended the Colorado Springs book seminar and met Amanda Gable from Atlanta. And when Amanda finished her book, The Confederate General Rides North, we had her come to talk to us at book club about it. It's a wonderful story of a mother-daughter road trip that leads a young girl who's a big Civil War buff on a voyage of discovery with hard. Now, this is the blurb out of the book, mind you. A hard-won understanding of the American history she loves and the personal history she inherits. We usually give our visitors a little gift, and because Bob and the kids and I had been to most of the sites that Kat, the protagonist, goes to, we made her a little photo album. And I've got some slides, but I'm going to wait and show them all at once because they're only about 6. And given my lack of technical skills with sharing, I think that might be the easiest way to do that. We've also had, and many of you know because they've been on the show, the Atlanta booksellers Charlene Ball and Libby Ware of Totally Books. Both have written books, and we've had them on to discuss their books. Lum by Libby and The Dark Lady by Charlene. Recently, they have together written what they plan to be the first in a series of mystery books featuring two booksellers. Can you imagine that? Called Murder at the Estate Sale.
I love that.
Yeah, for which I got to write a blurb for the cover, which was a lot of fun. So we haven't had a chance to have them up yet, but we probably will. Another guest that we have, Jim Auchmuty, spent almost 30 years as a writer and editor for the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, specializing stories about the South and its history and culture. Much of his writing was about food, and so of course we like that. And he was a founding member of the Southern Foodways Alliance at the University of Mississippi. But his most recent book is called Smoke Lore, and it's on the history of barbecue. And it's really an interesting read because it goes back to when grilling outdoors was getting popular in the 50s, and all of the ads for it featured men, with their tools in hand and their aprons on, and the little woman standing in the background holding the ingredients, that kind of thing. And it's a lot of fun to read. But when we had him come as a guest, we focused on his book. And Jim happens to be related to Ken, who's one of our members, so that was helpful. He came to talk about the class of 65, the subtitle, A Student, A Divided Town, and the Long Road to Forgiveness. The book starts in Americus during the height of racial struggles in the mid-60s and concludes 40 years later. It's a long way from barbecue, and it's a compelling look at racism in the South. And Jim was kind enough to post a picture of the book club on his Facebook page with this comment. Had the pleasure Sunday of visiting Calhoun, Georgia, to speak to a book club that included several educators, a successful mystery writer, 2 antiquarian book dealers, the former director of the State Archives of Georgia, and the project manager for the New Georgia Guide. Quite an accomplished group. Thanks to Kathy and Ken, who extended the invitation, and to Ed and Jane, who hosted us at their lake house near the Oostenaula River. So that's not so weird. Don't we sound impressive for a bunch of old folks who like to get together on a regular basis? We have discussed a couple of Mignon's books. We have not done No Word for Goodbye yet because we hadn't been meeting, but we also read her book, The War Comes to Sally's Station, which is based on events during World War II in a town that was, in Calhoun. She doesn't call it Calhoun, but it's basically set in Calhoun. And one of her little Christmas stories, The Christmas Cottage, which we usually at Christmas read a Christmas book. Our last in-person author in May of 2019, so it's been a while, was from Rome, Georgia, which is only 20 miles away. Raymond Atkins teaches English at Georgia Northwestern Technical College and is on the faculty at Reinhardt University in the MFA Creative Writing program. His first novel, The Front Porch Prophet, was awarded the Georgia Author of the Year Award for a first novel. And his third novel, Camp Redemption, was awarded Farrell Sams Award for Fiction and the 2014 Georgia Author of the Year for Fiction. His fourth novel, Sweetwater Blues, was a Townsend Prize nominee. So with so many prize-winning books to choose from, we each picked a specific book to read, which led to wide-ranging discussions. And unfortunately, poor Raymond had a severe allergy problem, which is very common around here, and could hardly talk, so his wife served as an interpreter for the whole meeting. And he brought us a stack of his books as gifts for us, and so that was really very nice. So we all got to take home one of Raymond's books that we hadn't read. And then there is Sam. Sam Edwards is from Calhoun. Sam is now 70, I think. He's had a multifaceted career, including working for Jimmy Carter, But he may be best known for 2 entries in Roadside America. And if you're familiar with Roadside America, it's strange things to go see when you're traveling. One was for his treehouse home here in Calhoun, and the other is for his restaurant in Rome, which is built around an airplane. His book, From the Outhouse to Treehouse to the White House, is his memoir of a rather checkered career. We all know Sam. We've known him. A lot of our members had taught Sam. You know, we enjoyed giving him a hard time about his experiences. But his restaurant in Rome does have very good burgers and especially fried pickles. So you see, we do take culture seriously here in Northwest Georgia. Author visits are a great way to learn more about a book, to ask questions that you may have had while reading. And most writers are only, as we all know, too happy to talk about their work. And I've got a few pictures of these folks. And now we're going to see if I can share this. All righty. We're hoping that this is it. Well, no. What have I done now, Ed? Let's see if I can. Oh, shoot. Okay. Well, this is what I want. Here we go. Okay. There we go. Can y'all see this?
I can.
Great. Okay, this was the cover of the little photo album that we made for Amanda Gable, based on the Confederate General Rides North.
Oh, well, we're looking at your Facebook page right now.
Right.
Okay.
This was pictures from Manassas, one of the locations that they visited. Okay, this is Charlene and Libby when they came up, one of their visits. They've made a couple. And this was also from that visit, but this is a picture of the members of the book club. And I think, these are folks that are still active. Y'all can see my folk art on in the background. This is Jim Auchmuty and his book, The Class of '65, out at the cabin on the Oostenaula River. And this is Sam's restaurant in Rome. You can sit in the plane, and we had asked Sam if we could have a book club meeting there, and he said no, it wouldn't hold enough. You can't. It wasn't safe to put that many people up in the plane, so we were not able to do that. And these are just some of the books that we've read in there. There we go.
Not coming through, Lee, but you're going to be back on in a couple of minutes. So if we can figure that out, you can conclude with that.
Okay, well,
All right.
This sharing thing and I have had problems in the past.
Well, you and I have both been on the road here in the last couple of weeks, and I think it's time to share a little bit about our adventures. I'm going to go first.
Okay.
Folks, I was hosting the show last week from my sister's house in Massachusetts, and I had cause to go back east for the opportunity to meet my first grandson. Wow, was that great. People always talk about how great it is to be a grandparent. Now I know it firsthand. But whenever a book dealer travels, we can't help but stopping in and visiting some of our peers and some of our bookstores, and there are some wonderful ones up in New England. So in between hugging the little guy, I stopped at a few bookstores in New England, David Lesser's Books, and in right outside of New Haven. Other bookstores in Connecticut, Massachusetts, and New Hampshire. And I want to share with you a few things that I picked up. As you know, my core collection is presidents, politicians, American history, and things on paper that interest me. So let me share a couple of those things. I picked up this 1886 photo of the Washington Monument just as it was being completed. And you can see in the background, the only other thing on the hill there is the Smithsonian Museum, or the building that later went on to become the Smithsonian Museum. I thought that was quite a photograph. Lately, I've been buying items that connect me with people, and I picked up this book. It was upside down. It was a travel journal from a young lady who went to Europe in the 1930s, and she kept a diary of her travels and pasted them in the book along with photos and postcards that she did along the way. There's just something, I may never meet this person, obviously won't, she's passed on, but there's just something so personal and connecting with an individual. I love picking up letters and journals and diaries. I think that's the kind of direction that my collection is heading. And speaking of letters, this one really moved me. I picked up this 4-page deed grant of a father who was bequesting his slaves to his son. Let me read a part of this to you. This indenture, made the 14th day of August in the year 1852, before the Civil War, between Hiram Stewart of one part and Hampton Stewart, the third son of the other part. Hiram Stewart, for and in consideration of the natural love and affections which he hath given, granted, aligned, and confirmed, and by these presents done give unto Hampton a Negro girl named Harriet, 5 years of age, and a Negro boy named Everett, aged 2 years old, George, aged about 39, a woman named Lettice, aged 40 years old, and he goes on and lists an inventory of the slaves. Wow, I was just so moved by this document. To think here was 170 years ago, this man who says that he loved his son so much that he was bequeathing other humans to him. And especially what we've been going on in this country, in America, for the last 18 months, the 1619 Project, the critical race theory. I don't know how anybody can read a deed, can read a letter like this and not be moved by where we've been and how far we've come and where we probably never should have been in the first place in this country back then. So I'm not sure what I'm going to do with these letters. I imagine at some point I'll catalog them and pass them out and find a good home. But I'm just going to hold on to them for a little while because it's just a really moving and remarkable part of American history for me. Another thing that I picked up, some of you may have heard that last week an unopened Nintendo cartridge of Mario Brothers sold at Heritage Auction for $1.2 million. Yes, that's right. A video game sold for $1.2 million. Well, the computer industry is not that old. The first ENIAC computer built in 1947 is, I guess that makes that only 83 years old, less than 100 years old. So the computer industry is quite nascent compared to that and becoming very, very collectible. I happen to pick up this book in German, Abriss e Logistik, and it's written in German. I can't really, doesn't even really know what it say. I haven't researched it yet, but I do know that a previous owner was Edmund Callie Berkeley. Now, Edmund Berkeley was a pioneer in American computing scientist. He was the founder of the Association of Computing Machinery. And in 1949, he wrote one of the very first seminal books about the computing industry called Giant Brains, or Machines That Think. So anything having to do with science and math, especially since in the last year we've talked about, following the rule of science has become very popular in the collecting world. I picked that up on the road. Here's an interesting pamphlet presented to President Fillmore by Edward Everett Hale. Edward Everett was a governor of Massachusetts. He was a senator of Massachusetts, and he was also the Secretary of State under President Fillmore. And once again, I find these association copies so interesting. Could you imagine the Secretary of State standing there in the White House, handing this presentation copy to the president, and the two of them talking about the uses of astronomy, the uses of science in our growing society, and those type of materials that have such a first-hand relationship are really meaningful to me. And I wanted to share with you one other piece. I got it down here on the floor. Check this out. This is the file copy of War Comes to the United States, the first 30 hours of dispatches that were written by Time, Life, Fortune journalists out in the field. So imagine, it's December 7th, 1941. The Japanese have just bombed Pearl Harbor. Americans are in a tizzy. Thankfully, we got some stabilization from our great president, Franklin Roosevelt. But correspondents and journalists were all over the world were sending their dispatches in on what to expect, what's happening, what the people are feeling, what they're seeing on the ground. And this file copy of these journalist dispatches tell the story of the nascent days of America's entree in the World War II. Once again, not only of interest to me as a historian, but just the emotions and the feeling and the first person stories that people were going through. So those are just a few of the things that I picked up on my travels last week. And now we're going to bring in Lee. Lee, I understand you were on the road as well.
I was. When we had Gabby Cooksey on several weeks ago.
Sure, another fine book artist, yeah.
I believe I asked, if she had, because she talked about how she didn't do selling herself, but she had a couple of book dealers that did handle some of her material, and one of them happened to be in Birmingham, where I'm from. And I was in a couple of weeks going to visit my brother there on my way to Conway, Arkansas, where I have some good friends. And so I got in touch with Vicki Stewart at Vamp and Tramp Booksellers in Birmingham, who happened to be about 10 minutes from my brother's house, and made an appointment to go see what she had. And on Gabby's website was this little book called Anyway, and it's based on quotations from Mother Teresa. And Gabby says that I was feeling the woes of the media, so I made this book in response to give hope and spread the love. This was in the summer of 2016. And each page has a little quote, like this first one is, "People are often unreasonable and self-centered. Forgive them anyway." And every one of them has, you can't see the printing very well, but you can see and it has slides that you can see a little bit better. But it's beautiful. It's just beautiful. It's done. She talked about Springtide Press that she worked with, the letterpress that she worked with, and then she bound it, painted it, all of that. And
well, Lee, I wondered what Gabby would say that you found her book out there.
Well, she knows it.
She does, huh?
Yeah.
Well, let's see what she has to say.
I haven't talked to Gabby, but I'll tell you why she knows that I have the book. So I asked Vicki if she would hold it for me till I got there, and she did. So I said to her, because on her website was a copy of Blight, the book that that one of the books that Gabby had shown us that was based on a poem from 1843 by Emerson, but that had to do with the destruction of the environment and climate and this kind of thing. And she said, yes, we have one copy, but I think it may be promised to somebody. And I said, well, can I just look at it? And so she said, sure. And her niece, who works with her, brought the book out, and they had a discussion on whether or not the book was available for sale. And I'm sitting there thinking, oh gosh, I don't need to buy this book. I just really don't need to buy this book, but I really would like to buy this book. And so they called Gabby to see if, because I think Vicki works primarily with books on consignment, from artists. That's what she does, is book arts. That's what she does. And that's what she sells. And so the word back from Gabby was that I could buy the book, and I did. So I have slides of that
well, why don't we ask her, Gabby? Is it okay if Lee buys your book?
Yes, I got the paycheck.
Good. Oh, you've got her on there. Oh my goodness.
Thank you.
Well, listen, I am so excited about it. I showed it to some book club friends last night, and they were just thrilled. I couldn't get my brother very interested in it, but my niece in Birmingham was really impressed.
Nice.
Remember making that book, Gabby?
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah, it is. Well, I've got Are you seeing my pictures? No, you're not. Oh gosh, let me go back and show you pictures. I just had a lovely visit with Vicki, and was just so excited to get this. So I'm going to tell my children that I'm spending their inheritance as fast as I can on things like this. Let's see if we can get to. Yes, the wrong one.
While she's trying to pull that up, Suzanne, are there book stores, book dealers out there that handle your material? Would you like to give them a plug?
I am not on consignment with anyone currently. I had a couple books with Abecedarian out in Denver, Colorado, Alicia Bailey, some couple years back through, she will take on books through exhibitions. I'm sure I believe she works with artists on consignment too. And then another store that I've had some correspondence with, but they don't currently have my work, but I really enjoyed corresponding with them, was the Kelmscott Bookshop up in, I want to say Baltimore, and I apologize if I got the city wrong. But those are two places that I've worked with or corresponded with.
Now, I understand, Gabby, you've got a juried show coming up soon, and I'm just wondering if Suzanne might be in the same show as you. What's the name of that show, Gabby?
It's the Designer Bookbinders International Show.
Are you in that one,
it?
Suzanne?
I am not. I have not yet submitted to international exhibitions, but it's one that I have my eye on, hopefully in the next few years.
I thought we might be having a book off here.
Okay. Are you seeing my
One day.
A book off, cook off.
Are you seeing my pictures, Ed?
No, afraid not.
No.
Oh, shoot.
Well, I think we can only have four scenes. If Alan wants to take me down and put your pictures up, he can do that.
Okay, it says that I'm sharing it to be live. I just wanted to show people some pages from Blight. Gabby
and Suzanne, do you know each other? Have you two met before?
No,
we haven't, but it's very nice to meet you.
Yeah, it's nice to meet you. Your work is beautiful. Your craftsmanship is phenomenal.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Gabby, would you share what your website or where I can check out some of your work? Your name seems so familiar, but I just don't think I know where to find your work.
Yeah, it's boundbycooksey.com.
Great. I will check that out.
Yeah.
Should I
Now,
try?
is that when you make a book, Gabby, was that the one and only copy?
No.
No, it's an edition of 28.
The edition of 28.
Yeah, you told us that you were going to do it the number of years you were old, but you thought you were getting too old to do that.
I'm getting too old.
Mine is number 17 of 28 on Blight. And so I printed out a copy of the poem because it's very difficult to read it in the book, without a strong light and a magnifying glass. But I printed out a copy of it, and I'm really pleased with the purchase. I think that not only is it a beautiful book, but it's a really important. The opinions and everything are really important, and to think that he was speaking the way he did back, nearly 200 years ago. But what progress is being made on the park where the pictures are from? You said that they were trying to restore.
Yeah, the beach is eroding the whole forest, so they're making more. They're pushing the beach further back.
Yeah.
And trying to build it up so there's more of a bluff without washing away the whole forest. So,
Suzanne, what's a normal run for you? Less than 50, I imagine. And are every one of those 50 in the edition hand bound?
So yes, definitely typically less than 50. I actually end up working a lot in one-of-a-kinds because I'll do a lot of hand paper cutting or working with natural dyes, things that are a little bit harder to edition. But I have worked, I'd say probably an average run for me is maybe 20, 25. The book that I'm working on finishing from my thesis will be 25 copies. So 20 regular printings, or quote unquote regular, and then I'll have a small run of deluxe prints. The largest I've done has been 53, and that was also based on a number of years. And it was
There's no way you're 53.
I did. Well, it was a chapbook, so it was just like a relatively simple pamphlet binding. So I was just binding one gathering of pages and cover all in one at a time. So it was a lot more doable. I would not have bound 53 of anything that was more substantial than that. 53 on a very exceptional basis. But it was important for me to have the number of years since the events that had occurred in the chapbook be represented in the number of copies. So, the things that artists arbitrarily do to themselves, this being one of them.
Now, Suzanne, when Gabby was on a few weeks ago, she shared with us one of her one-of-a-kind bindings that was made with shark's teeth. What is the most unusual component that you've put into a binding?
Oh, the most unusual thing I've put into a binding. I think it's most of that for me has been work so far with natural dyes. I'm fairly traditional in my use of materials. I really like ink. I like paint on occasion, paper, but working with natural dyes has been the point where I've branched out in the introduction of, for me, what are unusual colors, because I think that dyes that are, or colors that are created from a plant or animal, beetle, usually beetles are used, or certain species of them are used for red colors, creates a range of, and a palette of colors that we don't really see in our day-to-day. I think the colors kind of stand out in a different way. And so that's where I've gone to look for the unusual element, is in working with natural dyes.
Very good. Gabby, remind us again when your show is, because we want to have you back to show what you submitted.
Yes, I sent it in August. They let me know in September, and then I can only show pictures because it's going to be gone for, hopefully it gets in, and then hopefully it'll be gone for like a year.
Oh, there's no doubt it's going to be good.
Yeah.
We have great faith in you.
Thank you.
We do. And my visit with Vicki Stewart was so much fun. She has lots of really neat things. And when you asked Suzanne what she would do with the bridges of Madison County, Vicki had a piece by, a book artist named Daniel Essig, Essig, who worked at the Penland School in North Carolina. And he he does these constructions that he calls bridges. And she gave me a book that features one of his on the cover. Maybe you can see that. The paper, these are all leaves of, pieces of paper, and there's nothing written on them. It's not, doesn't have text or anything, but she had a couple of pieces that were similar to this on display that he called bridges, that I thought were really, really, really neat, and that kind of bridged the gap between, say, a book and the folk art that I collect. The type of art that I collect. So it was interesting to see, and I was glad to found her, and really enjoyed it a lot.
Gabby, earlier in the show, I put Suzanne on the spot, and I gave her a book, an author, and a place, and asked her what she would do with a binding. And I want to treat everybody equally unfairly. So I'm going to give you a softball. Gabby, okay. What would you do with Shakespeare's Romeo and Juliet in a northern Italian town?
Oh, there would definitely be blood.
Ooh.
There'd be brass, a lot of brass work. Yeah, I don't know how I could create fake blood, but like resin or something with it. Definitely leather, full leather binding. Yeah, brass work and blood.
Very good.
But you're kind of big on bloody things, right?
I like to add the weird stuff to it, yeah.
Excellent. Well, thank you everybody for joining us today. Thank you for sharing your knowledge. It was a wonderful show today, and I hope you'll come back sometime. That's it, folks. There we are for another week of the Rare Book Cafe. You can find us on Facebook or on YouTube. You could find us on podcasts as the Rare Book Cafe Raw. Next week, Lee Lynn will be back with us, and we're going to have some of our regulars, and it's just been a great show. Oh, these young ladies are so talented. I feel like a slug compared to them.
We feel old is what we feel, Ed.
Well, all right. I feel old compared to them. Thank you, folks. See you next week. The Rare Book Cafe. Ciao. Book Lovers Rendezvous, where the topics are priceless and the conversation is free.